Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. I got a story in the stack somewhere. Brian Fisher's my name. The program is Focal Point. I got a story in the stack somewhere. Heritage Foundation did an analysis that federal government workers work fewer hours than the rest of the American people, and they have a shorter work year. They have more days off, more days during the year where they do not work, and they work on average fewer hours per week than ordinary Americans like you and me. And I'm not slamming all government workers. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we don't need any federal government employees. Not saying that at all. We need a Justice Department. We need a strong national defense. And there are government jobs, federal employees that we do need. But most of what our federal government pays people to do, they have no moral or constitutional authority to do in the first place. And that's where I think the problem is. Here's a story, Washington Post. This will not surprise you, talking about how federal government workers are doing just fine, thank you very much. 7 of the nation's top 10 most affluent counties are in the Washington region. They did a study, the top 10 counties, the most affluent counties in the entire United States of America. 7 of the top 10 are in the Washington, D.C. area. Now, you heard a spot during the break about our Share-a-thon coming up, and we do need volunteers. Our Share-a-thon coming up in October 2 through 4. That's a Tuesday through Thursday. And we would love to have you here as a volunteer to help us answer the phones. You can choose the shift that's the most convenient for you over those 3 days. You can give 2 hours on one day, or you can stay for all 3 days. That is just completely up to you. We got people coming from Kansas to come here to volunteer. People come from adjacent states, and we'd love to have you come. So if you think you could be a volunteer for us Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, or all 3 days, call Deanna at 1-800-FAMILIES. That's the number to call, 1-800-FAMILIES, extension 204. And you'll talk directly to Deanna, or you can go to afr.net, get the information that you need. Now, kind of a lightning round here. I want to get to some information. We got early voting beginning. This is a real problem for me, and I don't know if it is for you. I'd like to know what you think about early voting. Maybe we can kind of focus phone calls toward that in the last segment, 888-589-8840. But I have a real problem with early voting. It's already started in Idaho, I'm sorry to say, my home state, and South Dakota. People are going to start early voting tomorrow. North Carolina has been taking absentee ballots by mail since September 6th. And by the end of this month, excuse me, by the end of this month, there will be 30 states that will have begun either in-person or absentee voting. And eventually, every state in the union is going to provide for early voting. And a lot of this early voting are in states like Ohio and Florida, which are battleground states. In fact, most observers are saying, look, no one can win the White House without winning Ohio and Florida. Now, here's the problem I've got. I'm a big believer in having a day of decision. And I think we ought to have November 6th be a day of decision. I think everybody ought to show up that's physically capable, ought to show up at the polls on November 6th. Now, I agree we need absentee voting for people that are going to be out of town, they're going to be traveling, or they have other reasons why they cannot be in town at their polling place on November 6th. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying they ought to be disenfranchised. We ought to go out of our way to make sure that they can participate, but I think you've got to have a good, valid reason why you can't physically be present at your polling day, because you're going to have a lot of people casting their vote before there's even been one single presidential debate. And there are things that are going to break in the month of October. There are going to be issues. I mean, we've got this deal with the Middle East aflame. That's revealed a pretty profound difference between Mitt Romney and his strong support for Israel and Barack Obama, who's basically telling Israel to drop dead. And, we're seeing evidence that the Israelis, may strike before the election because they cannot afford for their own survival to allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. And we've got credible stories that they could be less than a month away from having enough nuclear material to build a bomb. And Israel's saying, look, we cannot afford to have a nuclear Iran. Well, that reveals something about where Mitt Romney's at with regard to Israel and where Barack Obama's at. If you've already cast your vote, which you could have in North Carolina before this all happened, then you could not factor that into your decision. So I'd like to know what you think, whether you think early voting good idea or a bad idea. We've got some evidence now that 2 of the White House staffers were involved in that prostitution scandal down in Colombia. And my point here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the sexual conduct of public officials is not an incidental deal. We are right to be concerned about that. That is properly a matter of concern for citizens, what the sexual conduct of our public officials is. That's a legitimate matter of concern simply for the reasons of national security. You have White House staffers, part of President Obama's advance team. Who knows what kind of information that they have? I mean, it could be confidential information about the White House, what President Obama is going to talk about down there. They're certainly going to have information about his travel plans, where he's going to be and when. And if they're consorting with prostitutes while they're down there, who knows what kind of blackmail they could be subject to. That's why having people that from a sexual standpoint aren't guilty of misconduct is a pretty important deal. So 2 White House staffers involved in that prostitution scandal down there in Colombia. And I promised you I'd play the Mark Levin clip. And I've chatted with some other people who are leaders. This is clip 8, Rob. Chatted with other leaders in the pro-family movement that basically share Mark Levin's assessment here. And again, this is on point because as flawed as Governor Romney is as a candidate, and I don't know that anybody is just kind of wild about Harry when it comes to Mitt Romney, but I think at some point the American people have to set some of these lesser concerns aside and say, look, we've got a country that's on the brink here, and what we decide on November 6th could have a lot to do with regard to whether America tips over into the abyss or is able to pull itself back from the brink. Here's what Mark Levin said on the Sean Hannity show last night. Let's listen.
I would like to see a more aggressive articulation of conservative principles, as you're saying, but do you see that if this election goes the wrong way, is this a point of no return in your mind?
In my mind,
it's yes.
It's probably yes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something. That doesn't mean I'm not going to fight the rest of my life. I'm not going to curl up in the fetal position and leave my family exposed to this. But it's going to make the battle 1,000 times more difficult. We have a man as President of the United States who does not feel constrained by the Constitution, has nothing but contempt for it. We have a Congress that seems incapable of responding to it, utterly timid and cowardly. We have a Supreme Court, even if you look at John Roberts, that gives its imprimatur to the most outrageous power grab by the federal government in our lifetimes. So basically, rather than checks and balances in the federal government, we have collusion by the branches of government against the individual and the states.
So Mark Levin, and I agree with him, that we could cross the point of no return on November 6th. And maybe that's the other thing we could take calls on, 888-589-8846. Do you think if Barack Obama is reelected, in your opinion, have we gone past the point of no return? Would America be recoverable if Barack Obama is back in the White House? 888-589-8840. And the other question we'll take comments on. What was the other? What did I just invite people to call in and talk about? Somebody help me here. I can't even. Oh, yeah. About early voting. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. About early voting. What do you think? Early voting, a good idea or a bad idea? I think it is a horrible, absolutely no good, very bad idea. And I feel pretty strongly about that, as you can tell. I'd like to know if it's kind of mocks next to you or if you think that we ought to have one day of decision. And I'd love to know what you think. Do we cross the Rubicon on November 6th? If Barack Obama is reelected, have we passed the point of no return? Mark Levin says we have. He says, look, I'm going to keep fighting. And I'm with Mark Levin. Even if he's right on that, I'm going to keep fighting because I've got children I'm worried about. I've got grandchildren that are coming, I hope are coming, that I'm worried about. And I'm deeply concerned about what we leave behind for them. This isn't about me anymore. I've told my kids, look, I'm not doing what I'm doing for the sake of your mom and me, because we're going to be okay. We're going to survive. Station in life we're at, we're going to be fine. You have your entire adult future ahead of you, and I'm deeply worried about what we're leaving behind for you. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I take the shots that I do. That's why I get the criticism that I do, and I don't care about any of that because I think the issues we're dealing with here are so critical, and they're critical for you. I don't care about what people say about me. I don't care about what people think about me as long as what I'm advocating for is right and good and beneficial for this country and for my family. That's what I care about. And I'm willing to, have people say whatever they want to say about me. I don't care about that because my mission is to try to redirect the future of this country back to the founding principles. That's what AFA exists to do, to restore the moral foundation for the American people. And I'm going to keep doing that until the day I draw my last breath. I mean, I'm going to empty both barrels on the way down. I'm going to die with my boots on. I don't ever see myself retiring, and what I do, I can do as long as I can talk. So I could do this, until I get too feeble to talk. And I want to keep doing this until I just can't do it anymore because I think some pretty enormous issues are at stake. And I'd like to know what you think. Do you think we passed the point of no return on November 6th? Now, when we come out of the break, I'm going to play one soundbite from this Islam deal. Let's have the Jay Carney clip, Rob, queued up, clip 9. I'll have that queued up for coming out of the break. Can we squeeze it now? We don't have time now. I'll set it up now, and then we'll play it coming out of the break. Even the Obama administration is now admitting that this was a terror attack. I mean, their meme all the way along is, no, this was just a spontaneous, this had nothing to do with terrorism. This was just a spontaneous and completely understandable reaction to that horrid video that horrible man produced in Southern California. That's all this is. It's just a spontaneous outpouring of anger directed against this filmmaker, not even directed against the United States. And now finally, the Obama administration is coming out and admitting, no, this was a terrorist attack. But before they did it, you'll hear Jay Carney in the next soundbite yesterday trying desperately to cling to the concept that, no, this was all spontaneous, nothing premeditated. Now we know that our authorities in Egypt had 3 days of advance notice. Our authorities about Libya had 2 days of advance notice. And this is what particularly objectionable. Hillary Clinton knew 2 days before. Well, we'll get to that when we get off the break. We'll play Jay Carney coming out of the break. Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840.